You know, for some people, that morning cup of coffee is the elixir of life. It's your wake up in a cup, or it's just necessary to, I don't know, carry on. I'll give you fair disclosure, I'm not really a coffee drinker myself, but historic coffee drinkers include Beethoven and Bach, Thomas Jefferson and Ben Franklin, de Balzac and Voltaire, Teddy Roosevelt and Napoleon Bonaparte. Well, there's some evidence that people have been drinking tea since the 2nd century BC. The invention of coffee is a relatively new phenomenon. And while some people seem to think that coffee is worth dying for, there really was a time when you could be killed for drinking coffee in public. With its stimulating properties and its storied past, the history of coffee deserves to be remembered. Coffee beans aren't actually beans at all. They are the seeds of an evergreen woody shrub. In the wild, it can grow up to 10 meters tall, but is generally kept around 2 meters in commercial settings for ease of harvesting. The coffee plant is an undergrowth plant, requiring a shady canopy to thrive and produce its best. Its climate requirements limited to the regions between the Tropic of Cancer and the Tropic of Capricorn, although that encompasses some 70-plus countries with production. The word coffee is apparently derived from the Arabic word kawa, which itself might be derived from the Kaffa region of Ethiopia, where the coffee plant originates, but it also might be derived from the Arabic word for power and energy, or alternatively, from the Arabic word for wine. To appreciate the work that goes into the world's most popular go juice, the best coffee fruit, or cherries, are harvested by hand, and they don't all ripen at the same time. The other method is to strip all the cherries at the same time and then sort them by ripeness. Either way, the seeds must be removed from the rest of the cherry. But the big question is, who realized that the seeds, when roasted, make morning bearable? One legend, seemingly the most popular, has it that in the 8th or 9th century AD, a goat herder in Ethiopia named Kaldi noticed that when his goats ate a certain dark berry, they were excitable and had a hard time sleeping at night. So the goat herder tried them himself, had the same experience, and ended up collecting some of the fruit. He took it to an Islamic monastery where it was supposedly cast aside because of its bitterness and tossed in the fire. But as the alluring aroma of roasted coffee beans wafted from the coals, the soon-to-be coffee addicts raked them out of the fire and put them in some water. They found that the drink was less bitter than the beans themselves and helped with alertness during lengthy evening prayers. There's no direct evidence, however, that the story is true, and the story doesn't appear to have been recorded until 1671, hundreds of years after it was supposed to have happened. Most historians think that that story is apocryphal. A similar story is told about a Sufi mystic who noticed birds who fed on the berries had unusual vitality and tried some himself. The bird story may also be apocryphal, but Imam Muhammad ibn Sa'id al-Dabani is credited with bringing the liquid lightning to Yemen, becoming known as the Saint of Mocha. The earliest reliable accounts of coffee in trade came from Arabic scholars writing in the 15th century, noting that it spread from Africa to the Ottoman Empire via Yemen. This is when we first find mentions of coffee as a drink like we currently consume it, from roasted and ground coffee beans, steeped and served piping hot. The Turkish method uses a specific pot called an ibrik, in which finely ground coffee is mixed with sugar and water and heated until it froths. It can be reheated multiple times to achieve the desired amount of froth. Constantinople boasted the first coffee shop in the 1450s. Soon coffee houses became a place where ideas were pondered and entertainment was found. However, those in power sometimes feared the power of these institutes, so much so that in 1633, Sultan Murad IV of the Ottoman Empire banned the vices of smoking, drinking alcohol, and drinking coffee, presumably because people would sit around and complain about him while indulging in any of the three. Murad IV was supposedly known to dress as a commoner in order to find and then behead those who dared to disregard the ban. The development of a worldwide market in coffee came largely as a result of Dutch companies. In fact, the website Easy to Espresso suggests that the word coffee first came into the English language from the Dutch word koffie, K-O-F-F-I-E, itself derived from the Arabic. The 1860 novel Max Havelaar, The Coffee Auctions of the Dutch Trading Company, written under a pseudonym by Dutch colonial official Eduard Dekker, explains that in the early 17th century, the government of Yemen, where most coffee was grown at the time, tried to maintain a monopoly on its export. The word mocha, another name for coffee, is derived from the Red Sea Yemeni port of Mocha. In 1616, Dutch traders avoided the ban by shipping away complete coffee plants, first to India and then to Batavia, the then capital of the Dutch East Indies, now Jakarta, Indonesia. As the Dutch came to dominate the world coffee trade in the latter 17th century, so much coffee was grown and exported from the Indonesian island of Java that Java, initially only referring to coffee from that island, became another generic word for coffee. The Dutch were also responsible for taking the morning elixir to the Americas, growing it in the South American Dutch colony of Suriname by the early 18th century. Plants were then stolen from Suriname by the French and cultivated in neighboring French Guiana. A Portuguese officer then acquired seeds from Guyana, in another possibly apocryphal story, seducing the French governor's wife and smuggling the seeds out in a bouquet of flowers, and cultivating the plants in Brazil, now the world's largest coffee producer. Yet another story has French Captain Gabriel de Cleo transporting a cutting stolen from a plant that had been gifted to King Louis XIV by the mayor of Amsterdam to the French colony of Martinique in 1720. And like the beverage itself, the trade in coffee has its dark side. For example, more than 2 million enslaved people were imported from Africa up until the middle 19th century to work in the coffee plantations in Suriname and Brazil. In fact, the novel Max Havelaar, considered a masterpiece of Dutch fiction and to the Netherlands what Harriet Beecher Stowe's Uncle Tom's Cabin is to the United States, is a satirical attempt to denounce the abuses of Dutch colonialism, which by pushing out food crops for coffee cultivation, through pernicious taxes and quotas, and via the sale of opium to natives, resulted in near starvation and abject poverty among the natives of Java. The novel created a political storm when it was published, resulted in reforms in the Dutch East Indies that then, the New York Times wrote in 1999, sparked the Indonesian independence movement, which in turn sparked the call for revolution in Africa, which in turn awakened ever more of the world's colonized peoples and signaled the end of European colonial domination. Another legend has it that the morning mud was actually viewed as Satan's drink in the Christian world. Another possibly apocryphal story says that Pope Clement VIII was asked to denounce the drink, but first asked to try it, and liked it so much that he instead baptized it, officially making it acceptable to drink throughout Europe. Regardless of the truth of the story that morning brew was blessed, coffee houses soon began to sprout up all around Europe, with Italy's first in 1645, England's first in 1652, Paris joining the fun in 1672, and Vienna about a decade later. Here coffee was brewed in a coffee pot, whose spouts helped to filter out the grounds. At the time, one of the only other beverages that was safe to drink was beer, and so this new wakey juice was credited with clearing the minds of many who otherwise might have been inebriated. And as such, it is seen as possibly helping to spur, or at least correlated with, the 17th and 18th century rise of the European age of Enlightenment. The online book of author and motivational speaker David Gertine notes that the London coffee houses of the 17th and 18th century were the engines of creation that helped drive the Enlightenment. A more sedate place for serious conversation than alehouses, Gertine observes any man could gain admittance to a coffee house by purchasing a cup of coffee for the price of 1 penny. Here he could drink coffee, smoke, read the newsletters, or join one of the conversational groups. Therefore, it's not too surprising that such coffee houses became known as penny universities. Gertine's own hallmark is a conversational process called a knowledge café, café itself being a 19th century French word for coffee house. In his book Uncommon Grounds, The History of Coffee and How It Transformed Our World, author Mark Pendergrass notes that one of the ironies about coffee is it makes people think, sort of creates egalitarian places, coffee houses where people can come together. And so the French Revolution and the American Revolution were planned in coffee houses. On the other hand, the same coffee that was fueling the French Revolution was also being produced by African slaves in Haiti. And at least some people today seem to still think that coffee can produce enlightenment. While Captain John Smith introduced coffee to America in 1607, Americans remained primarily tea drinkers until 1776, when the Boston Tea Party made the drinking of tea unpatriotic, and the balance shifted towards coffee. After the Tea Party, the website Public Goods explains, Britain was now a country of tea drinkers, in America, coffee drinkers. While there are multiple theories for the etymology of the common term for coffee used in the United States, one suggestion is that when Secretary of the Navy Joe Daniels banned alcohol on U.S. naval ships in 1914, sailors started referring to coffee, now the strongest drink available on a ship, derisively as a cup of joe. Today, coffee is the world's most popular drink. The website How Stuff Works notes that more than 400 billion cups are consumed worldwide each year. More than 450 million cups of coffee are consumed in the United States every day. If internet memes are to be believed, the lives of millions of annoying coworkers are saved yearly by the magical effects of the black ichor of life. Moreover, How Stuff Works notes, nearly 25 million farmers worldwide depend on coffee crops for their economic livelihood. The methods of making coffee range from the French press to percolators, the automatic drip pot, espresso, pour-overs, and even instant or freeze-dried coffee. The coffee percolator, which incorporated the rising of boiling water through a tube to form a continuous cycle, was invented in 1819 by Frenchman Joseph Henry Marie Lorenz. Drip coffee was enabled when German entrepreneur Emil August Melita Benz invented the paper coffee filter in 1908. Instantly soluble coffee was invented by New Zealander David Strang in 1890. Ready-to-brew coffee was brought to the U.S. in 1850 by a company in San Francisco that would eventually become the Folger Company, now the most popular brand of ground coffee in the United States. The process of vacuum packing to prevent oxidation and lengthen shelf life was invented by New Yorker Edward Norton in 1898, and coffee sold in vacuum-packed cans was first sold by San Francisco coffee maker Hills Brothers in 1900. While drip coffee makers are still the most popular in the United States, Statista notes that single coffee cup brewers like the Keurig now represent some 27% of the U.S. home coffee brewing market. One popular way to brew coffee has a surprisingly recent history. While Italian inventor Angelo Moriendo patented new steam machinery for the economic and instantaneous confection of coffee beverage in 1884, the machine brewed in bulk, and Moriendo never took the machine to regular production. It was improvements made by Luigi Bezzera in 1901 patent that created the world's first espresso from the Italian cafe espresso, literally pressed out coffee machine. Bezzera's motivation was purportedly to reduce the time needed to brew coffee in order to reduce the length of workers' coffee breaks during the Industrial Revolution. Espresso is made using a small amount of nearly boiling water, which is forced through finely ground coffee beans, producing a cup of coffee in less than 30 seconds. Espresso is the most common way of making coffee in Southern Europe. While milk had been added to coffee in Europe since at least the 18th century, the addition of froth milk to espresso began with the improvement of espresso machines in Italy in the 1950s that facilitated the heating of milk along with the coffee, creating cappuccino. A version called latte that uses roughly twice as much milk that was thoroughly mixed rather than layered was invented in the mid-1950s, purportedly at the Café Mediterranean in Berkeley, California. Another term familiar today has a surprising etymology. Until 1938, in Italy, a bartender in a coffee shop was called a barman, but the word was apparently borrowed from English. It was under dictator Benito Mussolini that the term barista was coined as part of a campaign to Italianize words used in Italy. The term was popularized in the United States by Seattle-based Starbucks, founded in 1971 and employing more than 340,000 employees today. And if you think that your favorite barista is the best, a World Barista Championship is held annually by the Specialty Coffee Association. Not held in 2020, the preeminent international coffee competition, which focuses on promoting excellence in coffee, was won by South Korean Julian Jeon in 2019. October 1st is officially World Coffee Day, although for about 2/3 of the American adult population, World Coffee Day is, well, pretty much every day. According to a 2015 survey that was published in the HuffPost, more than half of American coffee drinkers would rather skip their morning shower than their morning cup of coffee. But the United States isn't even in the top 10 in terms of per capita coffee drinking. The World Population Review notes that the top coffee drinkers in the world are the Scandinavian countries, where the long, dark, cold winters make coffee highly prized. In a strange twist, Coffea arabica, the species that accounts for nearly 60% of world coffee production, is today endangered in the wild due to deforestation. Along with its rich and flavorful history, the global coffee market, which researchandmarketing.com valued at $465.9 billion in 2020, looks likely to stimulate humanity well into the future, or at least to get you through Monday morning. I hope you enjoyed this episode of the History Guide, short snippets of forgotten history. And if you did enjoy, feed the algorithm by making a comment or clicking that like button. If you have suggestions for future episodes, please send those to our suggestions email box. Check out our webpage at thehistoryguide.net. And of course, we're on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. You can book a special message from the History Guy on Cameo and check out our merchandise at teespring.com. And if you'd like more episodes of Forgotten History, all you need to do is subscribe.